Hey, we're group 36, and welcome to our podcast, which is Mental Health, Mental Wealth. The whole idea that we have with this project and this YouTube video is to kind of bring light to more mental health and bring awareness. There's so much to talk about and so many realms to cover, but our main idea is that whoever's listening to this, or if you want to share this to somebody who maybe needs a little a little feeling of belonging and not
Like
feeling,
support,
yes, a
little
feeling
support,
of support,
Yeah.
then that is what we're here for. So kind of with all that in mind, I think one of the main topics to bring up recently is obviously one that stares us like directly in the face, which has been COVID and the pandemic. Um, I know Grace actually had mentioned about how, you know, she brought up a good point that, before COVID, there was um, even less focus on mental health and mental awareness. And because of COVID, some of that got brought up even more so. So, one of the main things too is that, for example, in COVID-19, there was obviously a lot of focus about physical health. And that makes sense because, people were getting really sick and this was endangering lives. However, on a larger scale, most people, the majority of people, are going to be affected by mental health issues from the pandemic. And actually, an article that I was reading, which was really interesting, was why all COVID-19 hospitals should have mental health professionals and the importance of mental health worldwide crisis. This is a 2020 article,
Mhm.
and it's by Grover Sandeep and Associates from the Department of Psychiatry, Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education and Research. Um, India, quite a mouthful, but they had a lot of really important things to say, and that actually came from them about how it's really interesting when you take a look at COVID-19 in general and how many people are struggling with the side effects of being inside and being quarantined, and some
Mhm.
people like developing social anxiety and what comes from it.
Yeah. And so getting more into the whole mental health topic, obviously one of the biggest thing that kind of that the mental health, I guess, those mental health issues, the biggest thing
Mm-hmm.
that they face is, the stigma that is definitely present in our society. And so actually in a recent study done in 2021, researchers Rosley and Go from the National University of Singapore, they looked more into how young adults perceive the mental health stigma and where they think it originated from. And the results of the study demonstrate that um, most of these young adults, they mentioned four factors that they thought biggest, like most, how do I say it, most the biggest factors that influence their
Mm-hmm.
perception of mental health. And so the first one is society, which we know society has like a poor perspective on mental health. They see it as like I guess a sign of weakness, which okay, we know it's not true. But and then the media. So, there's social media, there's TV shows, there's movies, and they always tend to portray mental health issues as a negative thing too. Then there's generational differences, which, yeah, that is also true because older generations do tend to have a negative perspective as well on mental health. And then this one I can personally relate to, but religion and ethnicity, that I think that's definitely true because I know from personal experience, so I grew up in a very Mexican household and we also practice Catholicism in our house. So if you were struggling with mental health, you were automatically like, oh, you're crazy, you're labeled as crazy, which they have a negative perspective. As
Mm-hmm.
Mexican culture just tends to they don't really see mental health as I honestly as like a real thing. They see it more as like a shameful thing. And
I
so
actually, you know what,
personally,
Elizabeth, I actually didn't
yeah,
know that much about that until I took this
yeah,
course because
mhm,
I mean, I didn't grow up with that culture or that religion, and it's been really
yeah,
interesting seeing how many people in our class talk about like how that is an issue in in
Yeah.
Mexican culture. So it's like it's very surprising.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I feel like I mean, I guess it is kind of normal, considered normal to I guess like adapt Mexican, how do I say, values about mental health, because I know growing up I never really heard about like the importance of mental health, because yeah, it wasn't until I started college, which okay, that was during the pandemic, which kind of like Danielle mentioned earlier.
Mm,
The pandemic definitely made my anxiety so much worse, and it really it had like a big impact on my mental health, you know? And it so about a year ago in 2021, actually. Oh, that's actually 2 years. Oh my God, that's crazy. But when I sorry, that's like a big thing. The pandemic also messed up the timeline. But whenever I did start going to college, you know, in person,
hmm
I think that finally helped kind of improve my overall mental health and anxiety, because okay, it was a new experience and I kind of had to force myself into honestly like uncomfortable situations and new experiences. And it wasn't until so it was pretty recent that I finally, you know, I sat down with my mom and I was like, okay, you know what? She I know her perspective on mental health is pretty negative. So I was like, okay, I finally sat down and told her about my experiences with anxiety and mental health. And the first thing she said was like, "Oh, you know, like just get over it," which we know you know, there's so much more to anxiety and mental health than like, "Oh, just get over it." You literally can't just do that. And
Yeah.
the second thing she told me, she told me, "Oh, just don't be anxious," which if you have, you know, any type of anxiety, you understand
Yes.
that you can't just like it's not like a button, you know. It's a
Yeah.
whole process. It's a whole yeah. But you know, thankfully, yeah, over time I did manage to kind of like educate her in a way
hmm
on the topic, which I am very thankful that she was willing to hear me out, because I know there are a lot of, you know, honestly, there are a lot of caregivers that don't, I guess, listen to their children when it comes to mental health. But you know what, keeping that in mind though, the good thing about the younger generation, like us,
hmm
we're definitely more open to talking about mental health, which yeah, I think that's the best thing about our generation. So, yeah.
100%. I think that's
Hmm.
like definitely a good thing. Because I feel
Yeah.
like there's so much more talk about it and there's so much more support systems being offered. I mean, I don't even feel like
Hmm.
we'd have a project like this back in the day. I really don't think so. So,
No,
I
definitely
totally
not.
agree. And thank you for sharing. I know that like I don't have the same situation as you, but I have anxiety myself and I understand the
Hmm.
struggle with it and it really is not a button. And sometimes when people say like
Hmm.
don't be anxious, it sometimes makes me more anxious because I'm like,
Well,
"Oh,
yeah, it's
I'm
like,
like don't be anxious, don't be
yeah,
anxious."
but
It's
yeah, you
rough.
see, unless you experienced it, then I guess you don't really get it. That, you know, it's not like yeah, it's literally not a button. You can't just be like, okay, I'm not anxious anymore. Like, it's a whole
Yeah,
process.
it really
So, yeah.
is. And I know a lot of people like I know a lot of people developed a lot of social anxiety or anxiety in
Hmm.
general, or a lot of different things throughout the pandemic. And actually, people who even had existing issues, it became even worse. There was actually, I believe, a article I was reading, and this is from Don Leeming and Associates, 2022, about COVID-19 pandemic on those supported in the community with like long-term mental health problems. And what they found was a survey of 1,434 people living with a range of severe mental health problems carried out during like between April and May of 2020. They found that like
Hmm.
79% of respondents felt that their mental health had worsened due to the pandemic. So it's like not only is it creating all these new issues, it's like people who already have existing issues really struggled with that. And
Yeah.
one of the things I wanted to share too about that is um, so not myself personally, but my younger brother has Down syndrome, and when he was younger, he was like able to go into classrooms and was able to like be a little more social. And he's oh my gosh, he's so sweet, like the sweetest. His name's Carrie, but he's my half brother. He has red hair, so we don't look anything like alike, but he's super cute. And you know, when we would go out, he was able to be very social. Um, Now, naturally, like there are a lot of things that, you know, kids with autism process differently. But when the
Mhm,
pandemic happened, it actually created kind of this anxiety for him where noises started to bother him, like any
mhm,
noise. Like if you
mhm.
open the window, like the TV was okay because he was used to the TV during quarantine. But if you open the
Oh yeah.
window and he heard like sounds of cars, sounds of gardeners, people talking, it actually started to make him feel really anxious where he would develop like physical signs of it. He would get red, he would get like sweaty, he would cover his ears. So it's really like, I mean, I know some people are okay and they're handling, you know, the quarantine situation, the post-pandemic issues a little bit better, but you know, for people who have existing issues, it really exacerbated the problems.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Thank
Yeah, I
you for
think,
sharing about it, brother.
yeah, thank you
Oh
for
yeah,
sharing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know that about your brother, but it's really interesting that how like different situations that happen that are happening today in the world bring up like different things that were hidden.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like Elizabeth was saying about her anxiety, and it was really bad. But then when we actually had to like recover from the pandemic and go back to normal life, then she realized it was like a really big issue. And
Mhm,
um the same with what you were saying, Danielle, about like how COVID-19 did bring up all these mental health issues that people never knew that they struggled with until we had to come face to face with it.
Mm.
And it's just interesting that I well, the research that we had to do for this project just showed that 10 million people in America struggle with different types of untreated serious mental illnesses. And that includes anxiety disorders, mood disorders, schizophrenia, and other psychosis. And that was done according to a 2001 research study by Harvard Medical School. So it's just crazy that that amount of people have these mental illnesses that aren't being treated. And
Mm.
um like another research done in Singapore by Rosley and Gall in 2021 revealed that there are 46.6 million adults who experience a range of mild to major mental health conditions, and 11.2 million experience major mental health. So it's just crazy to know that um, how many people were suffering during the pandemic,
Mm.
and people suffer but yet don't go to seek help because of the stigma around mental health. And that's like sad to know that there's so many people struggling and they're afraid to go out to find the help that they need or to open up to somebody else and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, because they're afraid that they're going to be judged, or like Elizabeth said, it's going to be like kind of oh yeah, let's just sweep it under the rug and you can kind of
mhm,
deal with this yourself. And it's crazy because this study that was done by Harvard Medical School in 2001, they actually found like different reasons why people don't go seek um, um, help for their mental health. And one of them was that they just don't believe they have an emotional problem. And I think that can come from like if your parents are telling you like, oh no, you're not depressed, um or you are just stop being anxious, and
Mm.
that makes us think like, hey, like do I really have a problem, or maybe this isn't an issue, or maybe this is normal, so they don't seek out the help that they need. And it it's just kind of like sad kind of to like that people these kinds of ways, they don't know that they have a problem.
Yeah.
So like they come face to face with it. And there was another study by by Mueller and Associates from the Department of Psychosomatic Medicine and Psychotherapy in Frankfurt, Germany, that were able to do a study on um, game addiction and social media addiction. And what they found was really interesting, that they found that they found people that they were experiencing these emotional like difficulties, like from girls they were becoming more obsessed and they were losing control of their emotions. The same thing for males that were happening to them. They were like having these personality um difficulties, like they were being obsessed, they were being withdrawn from society, they were losing their interests. And
Mm-hmm.
all of these things are like signs of a mental health illness. But since society tells us no,
Yeah.
that's not anything, that's normal, then people think, oh, this is normal. My feeling that I'm losing control of my emotions is normal. um and it's just sad to see that happening, that people aren't
Yeah.
getting the help they need or seeking the help that they need.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that too because when I was younger, in high school, like I was suffering from depression and I was homeschooled and I was pretty much inside all the time, which was already a problem in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely had a gaming addiction. Like, and I mean, as
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's had a gaming addiction, like, it it is it is really wow, it is really intense, and how it happens. Because if you've never had one, sometimes people like look at people with gaming addictions and they're like, just stop gaming, like just don't do it. It's so easy, you know. But if you're in that kind of mindset, it's like the game literally becomes your life. I mean, I mean, emotionally, you get so attached to it, and you're so disconnect. You start to become more disconnected from your life that it's like that really becomes the most important thing to you. And I know that's like, you know, typically you see more males gaming, and so you see
Yeah.
like more information about that. But I mean, all addictions, it can be rough for anyone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think Elizabeth, I
Oh,
think you mentioned
um,
something about that, right?
yeah. Um, well, I kind of wanted to talk about, so there is kind of I guess a gender gap even within mental health because so for instance in a 2017 study about mental health and generalized anxiety disorder, the researchers Callier and Associates from the Australian National University mentioned that so generally speaking there is actually a higher personal stigma about anxiety disorder with the male gender. And it's kind of like, yeah, you mentioned, so I think it was Grace that mentioned it, but it is true though that with society, hmm, they kind of they see mental health, and especially with the male gender, as a weakness, and that's generally not true. And that it is important that we kind of talk about how we shouldn't have to normalize that men also experience mental health issues, because you don't have the whole saying like, "Oh, real men don't cry." That
Yeah.
can we talk about where did that come from? That is that is definitely not true. I don't understand why. It is a whole argument that's about to go down, but but yeah, yeah, that's for another day. But yeah.
Yeah, and
No,
it's
yeah,
interesting that I'm sorry, Danielle, did you want to
no,
say
go ahead,
something?
Grace. You're good.
I just say, like, it's interesting that you mentioned the stigma and how that relates to males and their mental health as well. And I just like want to put it out there like that so many people they have this issue, and like Elizabeth said, it's like hard, especially for men, to kind of admit that they have a
Mm-hmm.
problem.
Yeah.
And then from the 2001 research study by Harvard Medical School, they did mention that a reason why people don't seek out mental health help is because they realize that they have a problem, but they think that they're able to manage it on their own. or
Mm.
think that treatment is not going to be effective. And it's sad because you see society, you kind of see like all the negativity that's happening out there. Like for instance, just last year in November, the Parkland, I don't want to say his name because the victim's family kind of asked for media not to mention his name anymore to be remembered, but he's known as the Parkland shooter. And he went to the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and he ended up shooting team and teachers and injuring 17 people. And that was a result because he had depression, autism, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, antisocial personality disorder. And all of this was basically something that he did not like. He knew he had a problem. A lot of people tried to help him, but yet, like, he was not able to get help for his mental illness until something negative happened, something bad happened. And I think that we see a lot of males um, that as a result of them not being able to treat their mental illness, that something negative, something bad happens. And I think that's what we have to realize.
Mm.
Um, that and that's why we should like take care of our mental health, because you never know how far it's gonna go. Like you never know, untreated, like serious untreated mental illness, you never know what is a result of it. And like there's like so many stories. I have so many stories like of just recently the registered nurse that killed her 3 children and tried to commit suicide because she had postpartum depression and anxiety, and she had paranoia, mood swings, and hallucinations, and that all of this things that she went to go get help, but they kind of like they treated her for a couple of days and then let her go, and then nothing was ever done about it. Like there was no follow up on it. And like these are the results of if we have an unknown serious mental illness, or even if we have a mental illness, it's important for us to seek help. Or if you are a family member or a loved one of somebody and you see signs that they're exhibiting, it's important for us to seek help for them, to be their advocate,
Mm.
so that we can prevent these things from happening. Just like a lot of negativity that can come out of untreated serious mental illness. And when we ignore it, like Elizabeth said, like when there's a stigma around it, it kind of stops people from seeking help. And the result of it is, sadly, it's a bad result. It could happen to anybody.
Yeah, that's well,
Yeah.
I'm always it's like I'm always reeling from some of these stories shared, and like even doing this research, even having like my own mental health problems, or having family members with it or anything. It's just always, it's like, wow, it's very eye-opening to hear about these experiences, and it doesn't make me think like, what could we do better.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. And I'm happy that we were able to like engage in this project because it did open my eyes to a lot of things. And I'm
Yeah.
happy that in our next like our next posting that we're gonna post, we are gonna be talking about anxiety, PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, depression, hidden addictions, and we're also gonna hit on like social interaction with other people. So that way we kind of let you guys know, our audience, be aware of these different mental illnesses.
Mhm.
Some are mild, some are major, but just kind of let you all be aware of it, and let you know what are these disorders, and how you can kind of spot them out in yourself. Either you struggling with it on your own, or someone struggles from it, and that way you're a little bit aware of it, and you can seek help as soon as you can, or encourage somebody else to seek help for these issues.
Yeah, 100%. Supporting ourselves and supporting the people around us.
Yeah. I think that's how we take care of each other and take care of ourselves. But first, take care of yourself. That way you could take care of others.
I second that. Anyways, thank you so much, everyone who's viewing this, and thank you so much for spending time with us. Our next podcast is going to be about, the importance of social interaction. We're going to talk about how to make friends, which is very important. So stay tuned. We have other deliverables coming. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, bye, everyone. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.